La Antigua, the colonial capital of Guatemala, lies in a valley surrounded by volcanoes. Located in the center of the republic, it is but half an hour's drive from the present capital. Here in the background, the extinct volcano Agua looms up impressively. Bordered by Mexico, El Salvador, and Honduras, Guatemala is 3 hours by air from Miami. The new capital bears the same name as the country. The main square is flanked by the National Palace and the cathedral, an important construction of the colonial period. 7th Avenue is the city's main street. Ancient Maya motifs are frequently used by present-day Guatemalan artists to create a characteristic style for murals and friezes on public buildings. Guatemala is a land of lakes as well as volcanoes. Lake AMA17, near the capital, is a recreational center for fishing and water sports. Lake Atitlan, in the western part of the country, is perhaps the most majestic, its beauty enhanced by this now extinct volcano. Called Toliman, it is not far from the village of Santiago de Atitlan, from which these Indian women have come to do washing. A tradition whose origins are lost in time called for Indians to burn copal before entering Maya temples to attend rites. The custom was transferred to Catholic churches. It is a firmly established feature of market days, Thursdays and Sundays, in the village of Chichicastenango. Speaking of traditions, Indian handicrafts are very much alive. Exquisite textiles, intricate in design, are an outstanding example. Tikal was a ceremonial center of the old Maya Empire. A group of pyramids forms a sacred citadel that once was lost in the dense jungle of the Petén. Only in the late 19th century was it discovered. Today, Tikal is considered one of the world's archaeological marvels. With its mountain ranges, volcanoes, and pre-Columbian ruins, the dramatic Guatemalan landscape is for many unique in its beauty. The story of La Antigua began with Pedro de Alvarado, founder of the first capital named for St. James. A gift from Spain, the statue of St. James symbolizes the conquistador's faith. La Antigua is a splendid example of urban planning. Despite volcanic eruptions and earthquakes, its buildings still retain their colonial aspect, with its mingling of Indian and Spanish elements. This dwelling's patio is typical of the colonial period. Spain's Roman Arabic architectural tradition was transplanted to America, where it shows up in chimneys, ovens, and handsome windows. This house, the former residence of Dr. Wilson Popenoe, is perfect in its preservation. The temperate climate of Guatemala is good for growing fruits and flowers. It is ideal for orchids. This variety, known as the white nun, is the national flower. Another emblem of the country is the quetzal, a bright feathered bird that cannot live in captivity. Sunlight in La Antigua is intensified by reflections from whitewashed facades and polished stone streets. The Arch of Santa Catalina is one of the city's most beautiful monuments. The past lives on in La Antigua's fountains and projecting eaves, enduring reminders of Spanish civilization. Calm in its sunlight, La Antigua still breathes the aesthetic spirit of the colony. Here, time has stood still. In the palace of the Captains General, the representatives of the Spanish crown held sway. The royal arms still crown the facade. Across the shady plaza is the town hall with its stately arcade. Here, the council met. As early as 1620, the University of San Carlos Borromeo was educating the colonists and their sons. 60 years later, by order of the king, it became a royal university, equipped for instruction in philosophy, law, medicine, the arts, and Indian languages. Today, the university building has been transformed into a museum of colonial art. An extensive collection of paintings and polychrome sculpture is handsomely housed within its ancient walls. A beautiful fountain adds to the coolness of the plaza, a quiet refuge for city dwellers, especially at the noon hour. The calm of the environment is constantly threatened by the hazards of location in an earthquake zone. Stirrings deep within the earth from time to time bring ancient bell towers and cupolas tumbling to the ground. Walls collapse, leaving only a few columns standing. Worn statues within the cathedral lose arms and heads. Once again, the work of restoration must begin. Leaning walls must be strengthened. Rubble must be swept away. The National Council is responsible for the preservation of La Antigua. Its resources are limited, but it strives to repair damage to stone and adobe, to straighten twisted grillwork, and restore lost tiles. The Jesuit church, one of the largest and sturdiest, fell victim to earthquake. The facade of Santa Clara was defaced and parts of the building collapsed. In its heyday, the convent was served by nuns of the Order of St. Clare, who came from nearby Mexico. Today, all that remains is this magnificent cloister, one of the finest in the city. San Francisco is another important church. The statue of St. Francis of Assisi identifies it as belonging to the order he founded. it still serves the frightened faithful who gather to pray the saints' protection for their oft-stricken city. La Merced was built with earthquakes in mind. Its heavy walls withstood the great shock of 1773 that razed much of the city. Today, it shows signs of new and serious damage, but continues in use while the work of restoration proceeds. Only an archway and a few walls remain of the Church of La Recollección, which dates from 1717. Alongside it stood an asylum for lepers, the Lazaretto. A number of earthquakes have wrought havoc with the handsome church known as El Carmen. Its truncated facade here stands out against the distant volcano Agua. Only a few of the original statues have remained standing on the facade of San Agustin, built in 1657. The Capuchin nuns had a famous church and convent that formed an outstanding example of colonial architecture. The round arches of its magnificent cloister have been miraculously preserved. Water, flowing in abundance from this fountain in the central patio, caused Bougainville to burst into brilliant bloom. This curious circular cloister, with 18 narrow cells, was called the Retreat Tower. Here, the nuns lived in retirement from the world, amid modest furnishings, such as shown in this reconstruction of one of the interiors. A plan of the convent gives a better idea of the magnificent concept of its architect, a Guatemalan named Diego de Porres. Technical superiority is demonstrated in this circular column, which supports the upper floor of the tower and fans out into a broad vault. The Guatemalan government has recognized Porres's importance by instituting a medal bearing his name for award to architects of exceptional merit. Rooms of Porres's design are today occupied by the offices of the National Council for the Preservation of La Antigua and the City Conservator. Different offices provide services for La Antigua, give out information, and receive visitors.
Adecuadamente a los visitantes como ustedes o al turismo extranjero.
Old plans preserved in the archives provide models for architects and draftsmen in the work of restoration and reconstruction. All the city's houses and monuments are carefully classified. Ancient, tranquil La Antigua was plagued by modern advertising. The council tries to prevent it. Technicians engaged by the council strive to save even the last vestiges of buildings leveled by earthquake. The task is delicate and entails no little risk. For the work of repairing and strengthening cupolas, it was necessary to build flexible scaffolding, which will sway in response to frequent earth tremors. The cost of repair work is high. Many workmen are needed. The Organization of American States, through its emergency fund, has contributed toward the expenses, and its technical unit on the cultural heritage has assisted in contracting experts. Another room of the Capuchin convent is used as a workshop for restoring paintings and sculptures. Thereby, many works of art taken from destroyed buildings have been preserved. In this area, visitors are shown completed works of restoration. Murals that have suffered harm from earthquakes or more ordinary natural causes likewise receive attention from experts. Colonial pottery is treated with similar care. The task of fitting pieces together and classifying styles is far from easy. Soon after the founding of the second capital, today called Old Town, a terrible disaster obliged its population to move to the present site of La Antigua. The massive Old Town church still stands. Every street in La Antigua leads to a church or some other picturesque site, such as this in San Pedro de las Huertas. Here, before the church, is a public laundry, to which women of the neighborhood come in their brightly embroidered or woven dresses. As they go about their washing, they chatter in a traditional dialect derived from the Mayan. Industrial plastics have invaded the market, driving out the beautiful earthenware of traditional Indian design. Not far from La Antigua is the suburb of Jocotenango. On a feast day, street vendors station themselves in front of the church. Folk art bears a strong stamp of Maya tradition. Flower petals and leaves strewn on the ground form carpets over which religious processions pass. The deep violet robes of the group accompanying Jesus of Nazareth contrast vividly with the delicate hues of the blossom-bedecked path. The market is a riot of color, a clash of voices raised in barter.
Hasta otro día, agua de lechuga si quiero. ¿Cuánto vale? Se la va a dar en 8. Tengo una más chiquita. Se la va en 5. 4. 5 me vale masticarlo. Para que le vaya bien. si encuentro cuando me salga. No quiero ahora, pero mañana tal vez como vengo, como no tengo enfriador, ya no puedo meter. Y pues por eso diario vengo a comprar, no ven.
Traders spill out into nearby streets. This time they are after tourists. Sign language is used in haggling and bargains are struck. A crowd of sellers has gathered in front of the cathedral in the hope of finding buyers. Textiles, richly colored, intricate in design, and impeccable in workmanship are probably the visitor's best buy. There are still women who weave by hand in the old tradition. There are also textiles woven by machine, showy in appearance but inferior in quality. Mansions of the colonial period have been transformed into magnificent hotels for tourists. There are also hotels of recent construction. The Hotel Antigua, with its attractive gardens, is one of the best in the country. So too is the Posada de Don Rodrigo, which has 2 handsome lions at its door. The traditional musical instrument in all areas once occupied by the Mayas is the marimba, a wooden xylophone indispensable for the performance of Guatemalan music. Cornmeal tortillas are the bread of Indian America. Guatemala is no exception to the rule. For the traveler in search of something new, a meal of typically Guatemalan dishes, accompanied by the music of a marimba band, can prove an unforgettable experience. La Antigua, with its Indian traditions and colonial monuments, cannot fail to fascinate anyone with an eye for beauty and a feeling for history. It has no like anywhere in the Americas.